Hello, St. Paul's. I'm Charlie. I'm the rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm here to share with you an exciting event and an exciting opportunity and an exciting project that St. Paul's has been involved in for a number of years. And it's all going to be made real during the season of Lent, beginning on Ash Wednesday in a few short days. And we're here to talk to you about the Stations of St. Paul's. The Stations of St. Paul's has been in the works, as I said, for a number of years. It's a product of the work of the History and Reconciliation Initiative. And we'll learn more about that as we move through this interview. I'm here with Michelle Walker and Adrian Luxmoore, and they and a team of very faithful and dedicated saints has worked hard to bring this project to fruition. And we want you to know about it. So let's begin. Michelle, maybe you can talk a little bit about how the Stations of St. Paul's came to be.
At the beginning of HRI, we were two separate committees, liturgy and memorials. And at the very first meeting, I think, of the liturgy committee, someone had an idea, and I think it was Karen Harris, but she won't take credit, that we would have the thing that we do as Episcopalians as we learn and grow and live through life is pray about things. What we needed was a liturgy. She said something like the Stations. Everybody got goosebumps. Later, but we didn't do anything about it because we were sort of focusing on music and some upcoming actual events. Later, the committees were combined, liturgy and memorials. And I brought that idea back up after we finished our history panels. And again, I think people got goosebumps. The idea of taking little pieces of the history of St. Paul's, pulling them out, taking a hard look at ourselves, and then praying about them. Sometimes prayers of lament, sometimes confessional prayers, sometimes reconciliation, sometimes joy and excitement. So we were so blessed to have Chris Graham join us. He helped us divide up what he'd been writing, what he'd been working on, because we couldn't start on it until the history was mostly done. And once we had it broken down into 14 bits, the committee began to sit down with those pieces and think about what they would say to God as they were looking at those. And once we finished writing everything, Fletcher and Anne Freeman went through it all and made it all sound like it was written by one person, made it beautiful. Nice. So our writing was done, and what we needed next was some art. And we were lucky enough to have Adrian on the committee, who is an artist, to help guide us through that part of it.
Great. And so, and two, we should mention that these are modeled on the Stations of the Cross, which are traditionally 14 stations that kind of track Jesus's journey toward the cross, where people stop and reflect and pray. And so that's the model that we use to develop our own journey, the journey of St. Paul's. So Adrian, we needed to find an artist to create these. Do you want to talk a little bit about that aspect of the project?
Certainly. Thank you. The Memorials Committee sent out a request for proposals to a bunch of different artists, looked at what they proposed, and eventually chose an artist who grew up in Richmond, started at VCU, is now based in Washington, D.C., and her name is Janelle Washington. We commissioned her to create pieces of art around each of the 14 pieces of art, each around the 14 stations that we chose, with a view to enhancing the liturgy that we had written. And she went ahead and produced 14 pieces of art, which will be displayed in the church, around on the walls, all the way around the interior of the worship space, and they'll be available for people to, for anybody to conduct or pray them in a series of 14 prayers. Each station there's a liturgy which covers the There's a reading that summarizes the event of each of the 14 events. And there's a prayer, as Michelle said. And the intent is for people to go through the church, stopping at each station with the liturgy, reading the reading, praying the prayer, and working their way all the way around, A, through the church, and B, through the history of St. Paul's, lamenting, confessing, giving thanks, and looking for resurrection and renewal.
Great. That is such a cool and interesting and beautiful and powerful. And they're going to be surrounding us in our worship on Sunday mornings and other times. We'll hear a little bit more about that, but they're going to be a part of our landscape during the season of Lent. I think that's going to be very powerful. Michelle, what do you think people can expect from these stations when they walk in and they experience them for the first time?
I think what I'll do is tell you what I experienced when I saw them the first time. Having wrestled with the history, the people on the committee had just been, going over these sections over and over again. It was not written by the Daughters of the Confederacy. We do not come off looking great all throughout it. And the art that Janelle has made it'll grip you. The very first, one of the very first ones, she is the first slaves coming to, it's 1619. And the art shows hands in chains and what would look like the slave ship. And you're standing there staring at this and you're reading these words about what happened. And there's no way you cannot think about the culpability of the history of the people who were the part of the history of St. Paul's have in that trade. And when you get to the parts about segregation, when you get to the parts about the Civil War, there's going to be things that I felt gripped by, mortified by. This was my church in the past, that I could not have been a member of this church in the past. I think that people are going to find it both moving and convicting. And I think that's the important part that the prayers play, because you look at it and you maybe feel some residual guilt or some sadness, and the prayer gives you a place to put that.
Yeah. So this liturgy, these liturgical expressions and the visual expressions are meant, we're going to look at them as we have been for the last couple of years. This is another way that we're going to stare this history and our story in the face.
Right in the face.
Look at it directly. Yeah. So Adrian, what do you want to tell the congregation about how they can participate in these stations? They're going to be there throughout the season of Lent. How can we get involved?
Well, there's all kinds of ways. One is that there are going to be lay-led liturgies on Fridays at lunchtime, every Friday through Lent. On Good Friday, the clergy are going to lead a stations liturgy based on the stations of St. Paul's. They will be up every day. The booklet that contains the liturgy and the description of the art will be available, so anybody can come in, or any group can come in and pray or look at tour the stations at their leisure. And we really encourage groups of people, particularly book groups, or for example, the Sacred Ground groups might really want to come and share this experience. It's a way of walking through the history of St. Paul's in 14 steps. It's it will be a moving experience.
Nice. And of course, we'll do everything we can to communicate these opportunities to you. stpaulsrva.org. There is going to be a guided, a booklet for self-guided tours and a liturgy for prayers and reflection. So there will be a number of ways for you to get involved, and we'll make sure that we communicate all of that to you, as well as to the community of Richmond. We want as many people as possible, COVID precautions intact, to come in and participate in this experience. Well, Michelle and Adrian, thank you.
One more
Michelle,
thing.
one more thing. Yeah,
And don't forget that Janelle will be one of the speakers for the Lenten lunches.
exactly. Yeah, there are going to be opportunities too to hear from Janelle so that she can walk us through those stations and so that we can hear the nuances, because she's done an enormous amount of research, and we want to really hear about that. All right, well, Michelle and Adrian, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who has had a hand in this project. It really does take a team of people to pull something like this together and to be able to present it in this way. And I'm really excited. So thanks to you both and to everyone else who's been involved. We look forward to seeing you at the stations of St. Paul's during the season of Lent. stpaulsrva.org if you would like to know more. God bless you all.